What if your definition of health is far too low? And what if an ancient system could help you raise that bar? Today, we explore Ayurveda, not as a trend, but as a system that may hold answers modern medicine has yet to offer. Welcome to WellWave Now, your portal for actionable wellness insights. We, Breck Rice, Dr. Bob Levine, and myself, Tim Daniels, are your wellness catalysts, committed to elevating your health, enhancing your functionality, and optimizing your performance at every life stage. WellWave Now, where timeless wisdom lights your wellness path. Victor Briere is the co-founder and chief academic officer of the International Institute of Ayurveda. With over a decade of clinical experience, Victor is known for making complex Ayurvedic principles deeply accessible and actionable. He is the author of Pulse Unveiled and the upcoming Ayurveda for Diabetes. Today, he helps us understand what Ayurvedic medicine truly is, how it's applied, how it compares to Western models, and how to identify skilled practitioners. We will also hear how his institute is preparing the next generation of wellness professionals and briefly touch on the personal health journey that led him here. So welcome, Victor.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Victor, so great to have you on. And we've got to start at the very beginning, right? Because this may be a new concept, even though it's thousands of years old. But what exactly is Ayurveda?
Yes, the most popular question. Ayurveda comes from India, but think ancient India, not modern India. So it's a holistic system of health. And at the time it was developed about 5,000 to 7,000 years ago, it was the system of health. It wasn't considered complementary medicine like it is today. And what holistic means is that if you have any given presentation of a symptom or an issue in your body, Ayurveda is going to take the whole system into account and specifically look at what causes are leading to whatever negative experience you're having physically. And that's, a very simple way of saying it, but of course that's a very complex process. So Ayurveda is going to use lifestyle, meaning what you do in any given day, as far as what time you wake up, when you eat, what you eat, so on and so forth. It's going to use food, obviously, and it's going to use Ayurvedic herbal formulations, so plant medicine, to bring your body into balance is the hot word these days.
Okay, so you look at it. So that kind of digs into what I think we want to understand, which is what are the kind of the core principles. So one, you say it's going to look at one part, but you don't treat it separately. It's part of the whole. And it's saying that these things you talked about, diet, lifestyle, when you wake up, when Breck used to brush his hair when he had hair.
Exactly. Yeah, that counts too, right? Yeah.
Well, Breck, at least he didn't come after me.
Well, not yet. I want to get you both to come in.
Sharing the wealth.
Share the wealth. So what are those kind of, tell me what would you call those principles? What are those core principles of Ayurvedic there?
Okay, so there are hundreds of principles in Ayurveda, but of course there are some that are more important than others. I mean, Ayurveda can get into deep minutia that you can go crazy with, and it's frankly not necessary to uphold your health or vitality. The core principles of Ayurveda are what are called the three pillars of health that you need to uphold. And if you want to maintain vitality and longevity, the point of Ayurveda means the science of longevity. And that doesn't just mean I live many years. It means I live as long as I can healthfully. So I maintain my senses in good shape for the most part. I maintain my form, I maintain my function, and I live in relatively a disease-free state. And then I also live many years. That's the goal of Ayurveda. So with that in mind, the pillars of health that we need to uphold are anything that comes into our body that ends up becoming our body. So that's food, air, liquids. And Ayurveda proposes something very interesting that you guys might want to get into later, but our sense perceptions count as well. So what we see, hear, smell, touch, taste, all that has a complex neurological relationship with how our organs function and all that stuff. So therefore, it either creates or destroys health, depending on what we do with it. That's one pillar. That's called ahara, or nourishment. Second pillar is...
So one second on that. So Dr. Bob, when you hear that, what comes to mind for you? What's your reaction to that?
I think everything he said so far is really great because, Ayurveda is one of the, probably of all the health systems is maybe the least known and maybe one of the most important ones. I mean, it's really fantastic and people should be taking advantage of it. So I hear that it's all encompassing, that it addresses nearly all aspects of the human condition, and that's a great thing because, and I heard the word holistic, which is vitally important. You can't just focus on one little thing. You got to focus on the whole human being, and Ayurveda does a great, as we're going to learn from Victor, does a great job of that.
All right. So go ahead,
So,
Victor.
Yeah,
so
so
far,
I,
good. Yeah.
yeah, because I mean, most of us screw up with a health system where we're fine unless we're sick, right?
Yeah.
If you don't
Right.
have some symptom, you're just fine. But Ayurveda goes into a little more depth, right? What's the big difference between what we consider here in Western medicine that you must be fine if you're not sick?
Yeah, I love that word, fine. Because it's kind of, and that's what I grew up with,
You're
just
fine.
avoid the doctor until you get sick. And then if you get sick, you go and you pray that the doctor has something for you. And then hopefully it gets better. But Ayurveda has a different definition of health. And it is, as Tim mentioned in the introduction, the bar is significantly higher. And the definition of health in Ayurveda is someone has to have a balanced tissue elements, so all the tissues of your body, muscle, fat, blood, bone, all of it. They have to have balanced doshas, which is a word that we'll get into the understanding later. But basically, in a nutshell, that means physiological functioning, how everything's organized in the system. They have to have balanced excretions, bowel movements, urine, everything like that. And then there's a kicker in Ayurveda that is kind of goes beyond the fine part in Western medicine or allopathy, which is you have to be happy. You have to generally have a sound mind. And that doesn't mean, you're not suffering from some grave psychological disease. It means that you should be generally fulfilled and satisfied with your life. And that's not easy, but it's crucial for maintaining physical health. I think that's the point that Ayurveda wants to drive home. That it's not just about, oh, I eat the carrot and oh, I brush my teeth and oh, I go to sleep perfectly at 10 p.m. That's not enough, actually.
Good. And that's appreciate that. So then I took us on a little tangent here. Let's go back down the thing, the main path. Thank you. There were three pillars, and we
Three
touched
pillars.
on one pillar, and maybe you touched on the second one there, where you talked about the dosha and the mental happiness. But let us know, is that if that's one of the three pillars, or what are the other two pillars that we didn't touch on earlier?
No, that's actually not one of the three pillars. That's what the pillars are holding up, so to speak.
All right.
So the second pillar is sleep. Sleep is if you don't sleep, you're done for. Your health's going to crash. It's just a matter of time. Yeah, I can see Dr. Bob completely is on board with that one. And it's underestimated, its power in our modern culture. But basically, sleep is when your body does most of its regeneration. There's no way around it. So a lack of sleep or poor quality sleep consistently, your body's going to break down and something somewhere is going to start going wrong. So that's the second pillar is how to sleep. What are the rules, so to speak, around sleep? Yeah.
I might be jumping the gun here. Just
Yeah.
say you're going to answer later, but how does Ayurveda help with sleep? And if you don't want to answer that now, you want to answer it later when we get into it. But I'm just really, the question's coming to my mind. Okay, great. I'm on board. Tell me how I can help my sleep, or any of our listeners, how's Ayurveda going to help them sleep?
Yeah, so Ayurveda has a nice definition of what sleep is. And it is when the mind has disengaged from the objects of sense perception. You're officially asleep. So I
Hmm.
know that's a mouthful. But when we go to sleep, obviously our mind's still active. We dream, it's doing all sorts of things. It's pretty much on 24/7, but it is not engaging with external stimulus, external sense perception. If there's a dramatic enough external sense perception, we wake up. So that's one thing is the ability to shut down the senses at the right time and gradually. So that's one thing that we have a problem with in the modern day. It's go, go, go. And then it's like, okay, I lay down and I have to go to sleep, but I can't. So there's a process of gradual lessening of external sense perceptions can aid. There's metabolism. That's a huge one, right? What did you eat? Not just today, but what have you eaten in the past month? That's going to have a ripple effect on sleep quality, caffeine, alcohol. You name it, right? There are probably 50, 60 things that go into sound sleep.
Now, what does Ayurveda say about eating before going to bed?
don't.
Okay, good.
And there are reasons for that we can get into, but yeah.
What about drinking liquids? Like I always advise people to back off on drinking liquids at least 2 to 3 hours before sleep, so you're not woken up in the middle of the night and then you have to, reset yourself by going to the bathroom.
Yeah, same. Ayurveda has the same. I mean, a lot of the things are going to overlap, and we can see that already here in this conversation because they're just principles of health. Whether
Yeah.
they came from Ayurveda or whether they come from allopathy or traditional Chinese medicine, it's just the truth about the body and the functioning of the body. So a lot of those are the same. But yeah, basically, you want to start shutting down the metabolism. Ayurveda recommends at least 3 hours before trying to fall asleep. Now, does that mean you can't have a sip of water? Of course not. But for the most part, you don't want to be drinking, your milky tea at night or, alcohol is a different story. But if you're using alcohol to help put you to sleep, it might work, but it's going to make your sleep quality very poor. It's going to have long-term negative consequences and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Thanks for answering that question. I appreciate it.
Yeah. The third pillar, should we do that? All right. Third pillar of health according to Ayurveda is probably the most complex one and difficult one to deal with, which is the way a person uses their creative energies, including how they relate to others. So that means, and the modern maybe way of talking about it, we would say we would use the S word, stress. So relationships and how we relate to others is one of the single biggest impactful things for our nervous system. That's because of the autonomic nervous system and the vagus nerve and how we socially regulate and all that jazz. But it has a massive effect on how our body behaves. An easy example, if someone can't think of it, is just imagine a time where you felt threatened and imagine your physiology. Your heart rate immediately increases, your breath rate increases, your behavior completely changes. It's like becoming a different person, basically. And that's meaning that your entire body's physiology has just shifted gears. And if that happens too much, we break down because when we're in a threatened state, we don't regenerate. So chronic stress is a very real thing. And Ayurveda says that the biggest source of chronic stress is buried within relationship issues. On the opposite side, if you have very positive relationships, it has a very profound vitality boosting effect in the system. And actually, human beings need positive relationships. It's a biological imperative. It's not like an optional thing we can do just for fun or something like that.
That's a great, that's fantastic because I think too much of what everybody is doing, most everybody around the world in terms of trying to enhance health and longevity is not dealing really with relationships and human interaction. So I think what you're saying is fabulous and I'm on board 100%.
So, Victor, recap that for us, the three pillars.
Yeah. So you've got what you put in your body, including liquids, air, food, even sunlight. That's, different thing. But food being the most important. Food's the number one. But they're all important. What you put in your body, including sense perceptions. Second is sleep, quality of sleep, length of sleep, timing of sleep. It's not just how many hours, it's when you go to bed. That's because of circadian rhythm and things like that. And third is how we use our creative energy. The biggest part of that being how we relate to others. And obviously those things are all highly interconnected. So, but between those things, basically you can see what someone's health outcome is going to look like over time.
Well, in just a moment, let's take a look at some real world conditions and how Ayurveda has addressed those and the science behind that.
So as we get into that, we'll see that couple things as we transition to that. Number one, you mentioned the doshas, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yes.
And so I think that leads in a little bit to those real world conditions. And so what are they? How do you use those to diagnose or identify things?
All right, doshas. For anyone who knows about Ayurveda, it's a popular word these days. What's your dosha? There are quizzes online and all that stuff. My first thing off the bat is do not Google dosha. Don't do it. You're not going to get the right answer. What a dosha is, dosha means that which can go out of balance. So Ayurveda proposes that everyone has a unique body. We have archetypes, there's similarities, but at the end of the day, everyone's body is unique, like a fingerprint. And that body, there's a blueprint where your body is striving to match. And that obviously changes at different phase of life. but there is a way your body is quote unquote meant to be, or its most optimal state. And if you remain close to that state, we can never hit that point perfectly. It's not going to happen. If you can remain close to that state, your natural constitution, then you will be basically disease free. You will achieve longevity. That's not to say you're never going to get a cold. It's not to say nothing's ever going to go wrong, but you're not going to develop these hardcore chronic, life-threatening major problems. You're going to remain fairly healthy and functional your whole life. The doshas are what are the body's own intelligence that establish homeostasis. So they're always striving to establish a personal homeostasis. So my balance point is not Dr. Bob's balance point, is not Tim's balance point, is not Breck's balance point. So my body's always striving to do that. And that's what Ayurveda calls healing, when the body's able to repair itself to meet that criteria of its own blueprint. So the problem is everything affects your body. The weather outside, what time you went to the bathroom, how your friend looked at you, the air you breathe, all of it. And the doshas are what are constantly adapting to external circumstances in order to maintain homeostasis. So you have three basic doshas, and they're big categories. They're very catch-all-y type situations, and they all describe a different kind of fundamental aspect of physiology. The first is vata. It's called vata, V-A-T-A. And it basically deals with all the pressure regulation in our system. So the way things flow or move through our body is governed by the body's own intelligence of how to do so. Meaning, simple example, blood pressure. How hard and fast does your heart beat maintains a certain amount of pressure in your system, and that allows the blood to circulate and provide nourishment for all the cells. So that's one example of the vata dosha. Now, there are like 40,000 things that can go wrong with that. So, and it's performing thousands of functions all at once in the body, and it's happening. You can't consciously direct it. That's the important part. It's just doing it. It's part of nature, so to speak, right? The second dosha is pitta, and to keep it simple, that deals with all our metabolic functions. So how well we digest something, all the acids, hormones in our body that are responsible for transforming anything we put into our body, like we talked about earlier, into the body itself, into the tissue. So my body is literally made of food. But the body has a process of saying, hey, I need this. Let's break it apart and put it over here. The last dosha is kapha, K-A-P-H-A, and that's responsible basically for cell generation, growth. And between all that functionality, our body creates itself. So they're doshas because
the body creates itself. You mean that's how cells are replenished? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, and how we do growth. But those are the reason they're called doshas is those are the functions that can start going wrong. Okay. So they can fall out of balance, and that's what makes us sick.
Beautiful. So let's take all that and go back to where Breck teased us about a little bit there, and take us into how do you, when you work with people and then the Ayurvedic practitioners today, how do you apply that to modern health and what we do, and what kind of things are you treating with that this day?
So therein lies the challenge, which is how do you, I can give someone a list of 50 things that they should do tomorrow to greatly enhance their health and heal a lot of diseases. That's no problem. It's not going to happen because the lifestyle that we have, and for good reasons, not just because we're, these people who want to be sick. For good reasons, we don't do those things either because we don't know, or because they're too hard, or they get in the way of something else we care about. The last one being the most important.
It's an example of what you're talking about, actually. Like
example, let's use a very common example. Someone comes into the clinic. They say, hey, I've got this kind of like rashy outbreak on my arm, and I don't like it, and it's itchy. Okay. So what I'm not going to do is say, oh, that's eczema. Here's a cream. That's what I'm not going to do. So I'm going to start asking them questions. That's what Ayurveda recommends. Okay. Anything else going on wrong in your body will be the first question. What else is up? And they say, oh, nothing really. I really came in for the rash, but, actually I have been getting some acid reflux. And, I've been kind of sweating a bit more, I noticed. And I kind of have this body odor that's kind of like sour, acrid. Okay. This is a very simple example. But in Ayurveda, all those things are pointing to the same problem, which is going to be a metabolic problem in this case. So they're probably too acidic, frankly, to keep it simple, and they need to make some dietary changes because that's what's they're putting in too many heating acidic foods into their system. So next question is, what do you eat? Go down the list, blah, 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 blah. You know, half of it's fine, half of it's not fine. But I'm not going to sit there and change everything in their diet because it's too mentally stressful to do all at once. And it just won't happen. So I'll pick maybe the top three things that I think are causing the problem. Let's say number one on the list is coffee, very acidic substance, right? And so I say, how much coffee do you drink a day? 2 cups. 2 cups. How big are your cups? 16 ounces, right? So that's how many cups? That's actually 4 cups, right? Okay, so, but I don't put any cream or sugar in. It's like, okay, cool. So that's a common, conversation talking about that. It's like, well, if I were to say, yeah, just get rid of the coffee, no way, not going to happen. Not only that, that's not fair. I can't just ask him to get rid of coffee. The next question is why? Why do you drink so much coffee? When did this start? I just had a kid 2 years ago, sleep deprivation. I go to my job, I need to perform. If I don't drink coffee, I fall asleep at my desk. I'm going to get fired. And that's a really good reason to do this thing. But the problem is they're caught between a rock and a hard place because it's that substance that's contributing, not solely causing, but in a significant way to every single health problem that they're currently experiencing. So we have to create a strategy of how to wean them off coffee and other maybe acidic, spicy foods like tomatoes, garlic, things like that. Not forever, but temporarily, so that the body can heal and return to its homeostasis point. So that's like one example.
Thanks for giving us that example. That was really good.
Yeah, and that ties in a little. Well, it relates to. I'm thinking back. We had somebody with us here about 2 or 3 weeks back, and she was talking about how she needed to get in. Well, there was two people. They need to get into the parasympathetic state for the body to heal, and that's kind of what we've talked about here. Another person who was able to get off of medications from ulcerative colitis talked again about how she needed to get her body time to heal, and found out. So these principles are jiving with what people have found from other avenues. What it seems a little bit like is that we're really talking about, and like you said, everything affects health. So you're almost talking about this is Ayurvedic as being lifestyle medicine.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that doesn't mean you have to have a perfect lifestyle, but because the body is very resilient in many cases and it can handle a lot of things. So you're looking for causes. What things are buried in the lifestyle that are causing the pathology that's resulting in a manifested symptom or symptoms? But typically, especially with chronic long-term diseases, there's a lot of warning signs before the symptoms manifest.
There any overlap to the mind body? Like, our last interview with the lady that really had to overcome all of these health struggles. And she was told by providers that a lot of it must be in her head. They couldn't find answers. What's the methodology for that mind body connection?
If there were one sentence in the human history that I wish never was spoken, is that it's all in your head. I can't stand that phrase because in my opinion, it's such an insult to the reality most people are facing.
Yeah.
And it's just blatantly not true. Anything that happens in the mind gets relayed and correlated to the physical structure of the body and vice versa. I mean, there's really no denying it, even in modern science, between the autonomic nervous system, all that stuff. It's all running up and down the whole system, changing its function and behavior constantly. So Ayurveda as a principle, that's quite profound, and it's a big statement. All diseases, not like some, all diseases are psychosomatic. All of them.
That's what I was going to say. I said I changed one word in that sentence. It's all in your head. I changed that to it's always in your head.
Yes. Completely agree. Yes.
Yeah, always.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
There's no way it can't. Yeah.
It's like the bad rap that placebo gets. I mean, I believe that healing happens because of the placebo response as an underlying factor. And if it's not there, healing is not happening. That's just my theory about it. But anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, Ayurveda would completely agree with that. I mean, the word placebo is, it is what it is. But for those who aren't familiar with that term, it's you could give someone a pill, a sugar pill that basically is going to do nothing physiologically in and of itself. But the idea, their belief that they're getting better will have a profound effect on their physiology and actually encourage healing. But that's true, because if it puts you in a state of calm, like something like faith, right? Faith makes people calm. Your body will start to heal. That's what calmness is, physiologically, right? It will start to reorganize, the doshas will start to behave in such a way where they reorganize the system to a more optimal state.
I'd like to ask another question, because I know in traditional Chinese medicine, there's a lot of the similar philosophies in a way. Although I love the way you're describing all these different parts of Ayurveda. Traditional Chinese medicine uses a lot of herbs and compounds, plant-based stuff. Can you cover a little bit about? Maybe I'm jumping the gun. I don't know, but could you cover a little bit of that? Because I think it's important for everyone to know it's not just lifestyle, or maybe the herbs feed into the lifestyle too, which they do. So please, Victor.
But as you address that, Victor, preface that, put it in some context as well. So it gets back to what do you advocate Ayurvedic for these days people come in? Now it could be, hey, even if somebody comes in and they've got some form of cancer, that they should still be taking in some Ayurvedic type of lifestyle modifications to go along with it. But within that, what do you emphasize it for, and what do you really see it as the way to what it should be addressing? And then weave in, if you would, Dr. Bob's question on, well, so how do you do that? Is it just on advice? Is it, do you throw some, you talk about nutrition being a big factor. Does that get into these herbs or something different, if you would?
Okay. Yeah, I'll do my best to answer both questions in the same thread. Okay.
Well,
so,
we know you can. That's why we brought you on.
all
We
right.
wouldn't have you on the
I accept the
show if
challenge.
you couldn't answer a complex question for us. Now, come
Yeah.
on.
All right. Okay. So here we go. So one of the biggest imbalances I deal with all the time is diabetes. Diabetes and obesity, well, they're very related in most cases, not every case, but most cases. And that is like a quintessential lifestyle disease. Again, this is not everybody, but I'm making broad strokes because we're here talking in general. So basically, someone has to be pretty unhealthy for quite a long time to develop the pathology of diabetes.
And that would be, sorry, I'm going to interrupt. That would be type 2
Yes,
diabetes.
thank you.
Yeah,
Type 2, not type 2.
Yeah, type 1 happens at birth, where the
Yeah.
pancreas isn't releasing the insulin properly, and there's a void of insulin. And type 2 is when the insulin's coming, but it's just not able to work anymore. And as you say appropriately, Victor, it didn't start like that.
No,
It's a long time coming.
I can remember one of our other experts came on and said it's a type 3 that he first identified. Said that Alzheimer's was actually type 3 and took a long time to develop, and you could address that too.
Okay, yeah, definitely. So yes, thank you, Dr. Bob. Type 2 is what we're talking about. So insulin resistant type diabetes. And yeah, there's a long path to develop that disorder. And there are tons of warning signs before the diagnosis hits, so to speak. Because it's not like you didn't have diabetes yesterday, then you get diagnosed, now you have diabetes. There is a huge path to that situation. And most of it deals with two factors Ayurveda says very clearly in its text. The two main causes, not the only causes, the two main causes are overnourishment and not just sedentariness, a desire to be sedentary. And that is very important because that addresses the mind, right? It addresses the type of lifestyle someone's desiring to live, and which translates into behavior, what they're going to avoid and what they're going to seek. So someone can have a desk job, which is sedentary, but they may not have the desire to be sedentary. And so the moment they get up from the desk, they're going to start being relatively active. The body, when it's healthy, wants to move. It wants to be active to a certain extent. And then overnourishment, the second one, which is in our modern day, we just say that's overeating. And that doesn't just mean, calories, right? Sure, calories is one metric, but it's also frequency of eating. When someone comes in the clinic, most of my clients who have been diagnosed with either prediabetes or diabetes or on their way, they're frequently eating 5 to 11 times a day.
Wow.
And, yeah. And so, but what they'll say when I ask them, when do you eat, is 3. So, but they're not like trying to be deceitful, right? So when you actually go through a day and take the time to ask all the questions, say, whoa, wait, you just said, what'd you have between breakfast and lunch? Oh, I had an apple. Okay, if you have an apple, That's going to reset the whole digestive process. Your body's going to have to release insulin. It's going to go through a whole thing. It's going to stop digesting things lower down in the digestion that you ate earlier as efficiently as it was, so on and so forth. Every time you drink anything with calories, not trying to count calories, but anything that has calories, your body has to respond with insulin, which is part of the Pitta dosha in Ayurveda. So when you actually count it out with a lot of these people, they're constantly putting something in their system, constantly for many years. And a lot of times those things aren't so great. A lot of processed food, a lot of junk food,
Yeah.
a lot of very heavy to digest foods. So a lot of people think, oh, diabetes type 2, sugar. All I need to do is not eat sugar. Actually, the consumption of sugar is really not the primary factor. It's the quality of metabolic power that your body has and how it responds to anything you put in your system is the biggest factor.
Please explain quality of metabolic power.
Sure. So your body is constantly metabolizing, meaning breaking things down and preparing it to be converted into the body's tissue. That's happening 24/7 from the moment of conception until the last day. Actually, even after that. But anyways, yeah. So that's constantly happening. The kind of like control tower for that, let's say, where a lot of that functioning has its hub, is the upper GI, specifically the stomach and small intestine. Very first part of the small intestine called the duodenum. So that's where most of this destruction or separation of food to make it either waste, things that are going to become waste, or things that are going to become nourishment happens there. And then it continues down the small intestine where the body's absorbing what it needs to absorb, hopefully. And then finally into the colon where it gets prepared to be evacuated and some more stuff happens, but we don't need to get into that. Okay. So when this area of the body gets overloaded or weakens, what happens is the separation between food, what can be used by the body, and what needs to be wasted becomes less efficient. So you get kind of food waste particles, and then as those go through the small intestine, they get absorbed into the system, but it's not pure nourishment. So the cells end up eating kind of slightly toxified nourishment that gets stuck in the cells. The cells can't deal with it, or they can to a certain extent, but over time, many years, the system gets overloaded. The modern word for this is toxicity as a catch-all term, right? So the cells catch these little particles, they get stuck in the cells, they start interfering with the cellular function. One potential outcome of that is insulin resistance, where the cells get so gummed up that those individual cells cannot receive insulin and then consume blood sugar, which is why blood sugar goes up, because the cells can't receive the insulin signal to eat, basically. That's what I mean by compromised digestion or weakened metabolic power.
Thank you.
So I could see here how Ayurvedic could really help address diabetes and reverse that. What else falls into the bucket of? So you mentioned a lot of chronic things. So would you apply Ayurvedic to osteoarthritis? Would you apply it to autoimmune conditions? What do you say about that, Victor?
Yeah, all those. Any chronic disease, even acute diseases. But I will say that, Ayurveda has obviously a whole literature on types of diseases and how they form and their pathologies and all that stuff. Ayurveda acknowledges that there are a lot of diseases that once they hit a certain point, it's not going to get reversed. So I don't want people to think that Ayurveda is this magical machine that can cure any illness. It cannot do that. But basically, the fundamental principles of Ayurveda were built or, expounded to be able to manage any kind of pathology or any sickness to the best of its ability and the resources that are at hand, in the same way allopathy does in its own way, right? It's very rare you're going to see a doctor just say, yeah, forget about it. That's just something that we can't do anything at all. Ayurveda has the same approach.
Okay. So are there any, so you say this is what the ancient Indians do, and I've got a side question we'll go into on given that. But the direct question, is there anything that shows that people who followed the Ayurvedic recommendations to the T or to 90%, that they did achieve better health span, or they do have better health span today? Or have you seen any recent, and take it even in your own work there, have you been getting the great results, outside of diabetes? Are you getting great results on people, your patients being, or if you want to call them patients or clients, because I know you don't go by the MD word, um, getting better results, better biomarkers? What's the evidence that you about past
Yeah.
or present, Victor?
Yeah, I mean, there's massive amounts of evidence. I mean, if you want to do the online thing and read studies or articles, the NIH or, any organization like that has tons of published articles on Ayurvedic treatments and protocols and benefits.
And they
In
can
my
find
own,
that they can
yeah,
find that at pubmed.gov if they want to go there, right? Okay. Yeah.
yeah. And
Right.
I have
For
articles
those
on
who
my
those for those
website.
for
Yeah.
them, I'm sorry, for those who don't know, on the PubMed.gov is really kind of the trusted source of even for allopathic people in the US to go there to look for gold standard abstracts or studies, the double blind, placebo controlled, peer reviewed type of work.
And that's National Library of Medicine.
Sorry,
Um,
go ahead.
yeah, no, all good. So, and then, okay, but I can give you real life examples from my own experience. We could take the opposite of diabetes. I had a case, and this person has given me permission to talk about the case. I will not name names, obviously, but let's call James the client, right?
Mhm.
So James is 30-year-old male suffering from severe emaciation. So he's 5'7", and at the time I met him, he was 79 pounds.
Wow.
Deathbed up, right? So barely functional, obviously distressed to the max. And he was diagnosed allopathically with Crohn's at the age of 9, which is very rare for someone that young to be diagnosed with Crohn's. So basically, from the age of 9, he's had a serious metabolic issue where he would not build tissue, fat, muscle, all that stuff. So he only grew to a point and then basically stopped. And anytime he gained a little bit of weight, it would almost immediately come off over the next few months. So he was hospitalized multiple times, given, intravenous nutrition, all that stuff. The whole thing, he would go up 200 pounds and then slowly start dropping down. So this is a really serious case. So taking Ayurvedic, so taking a Western nutrition approach, there was a hyper focus on calories and the nutrients in food, which makes sense, right? Not so bad. But from an Ayurvedic perspective, that's only 50% of the story. The other 50% is what your body does with that nutritional stuff you put in. Because you could eat the golden carrot that has every nutrient in the universe and it's perfect. And if your body doesn't absorb it, it's not going to do anything for you.
Right.
Right.
So, yeah. So, man, no matter how many calories this guy was eating, he was not putting in. He would have 6 to 10 bowel movements a day. I mean, really gnarly stuff. So, obviously, this was a long-term case. This was not going to get resolved overnight. We started working. I started meeting with him every day. Why every day? For the psychology of it. I'm not a therapist. We weren't doing therapy, but he needed to know that he could talk to someone, and he started talking about his lifestyle problems, the constant stress he was under, mainly from his father. We all get the idea, right? So it turned out a pretty gnarly situation. So this kid was under constant stress, fear, stress, all that stuff from multiple angles, which is going to wreck your digestive system. And that's been happening since he was a kid. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, yeah, we resolved his stress and he's fine. That's not how it goes down. Stress was just one of the causes, but a significant cause. The second thing is the Ayurvedic approach to building tissue is that we have this metabolic source, this hub. That's in short in Ayurveda called Agni. Agni means fire. So that's the metaphor that's used in Ayurveda as fire. It's not literal fire. It's a metaphor because the digestion acts like fire. So the Agni of this guy was seriously compromised, couldn't get better. But if you feed someone more than the Agni can transmute, it turns into that stuff I was talking about earlier, that half food. So his system was constantly being toxed because they were trying to shove food down his throat to gain weight. So we backed off his caloric intake to a level that was much lower, but still maybe pushing it a little. But lo and behold, his bowels started to change. So that's a good sign, right? That means the body's starting to process food better. And he started putting on little tiny bits of weight here and there, and an ounce, a little bit, but it was going up. Started working on the stress, gave him some techniques, talked him through some things. start giving him herbs.
Sorry. Do those stress alleviation techniques come from Ayurveda?
Yes, they come from Ayurveda. Yes. But it's not like, oh, sit and meditate all day. That's not going to work, right? We got to make it real practical and real accessible, and it's got to be real and work for that.
Absolutely.
Then, so of course, we start giving him herbs. Classic Ayurvedic herbal formulations, of which there are thousands. I mean, it's like a whole pharmacy. And what those herbs do is they act like superfoods, foods, but they have more of a intense effect. And you have to be careful with herbs because you only want to give the herbs that are going to give the qualities in the system that you're looking for. And you have to direct them to the right place in the system. So that's a whole art form in and of itself, is learning herbalism. Like, these days it's very popular. Oh, everyone should take turmeric. Ayurveda would say it's a terrible idea. Don't do it. Or the very popular one right now is take ashwagandha if you're stressed out. Also a terrible idea. It's got to be the right qualities for your body at that time.
Why is it a terrible idea? I'm just curious because you're right. It's the rage now. So why is it a terrible idea for both of those?
Okay, so let's move away from James for a second and go to, let's say, someone who's struggling with weight. So they have a weight imbalance on the heavy side. Ashwagandha will promote the body to build tissue, muscle, and fat. So if you have someone who's in metabolic distress and the body's not able to handle and create its form properly, and it's generating too much fat and all that stuff, you guys know, then ashwagandha is the last herb you want to give them. It's going to actually promote that and make weight loss harder. And what's more important than the minor stress relieving effect ashwagandha is going to give? Because herbs have a limit. They're not magic, right? Yeah. They have a 10 to 30% benefit at best. They're assistants. They help, right? They're not the rulers. They're not the CEO.
Yeah, great. Yeah. No magic bullet, right? No magic bullet.
No.
And that's, and I'm good. I know, and I could see you got more depth you could go into there, and we drag into that depth. We want to, but we've only got about 10, 12 more minutes with you here. Right. And so we're never going to tap your complete expertise. That you'll have to come back, or people will have to read your book, or have to go to your institute on that, whatever that big depth here. But so with some of the time we have left here, one of the things we're going to get up next into, and you touched upon a little bit about how Ayurveda fits and sometimes clashes with, if it doesn't clash with, modern medicine, and how to make them work together. And you kind of gave an example of that as part of that when you talked about nutrition, but taking extra steps. So we'll get into that a little bit, in our next part here. The one sidebar question that I've got to ask, but briefly here before we get into the next part, gets back to, I guess, conversation we had when we first met a little bit, but how tightly coupled. For some people, they may want to say, hey, I love it if it's tightly coupled. For others, they say, boy, it scares me a little bit. But given this comes out of the ancient Indian tradition, how tightly coupled is this with Hinduism? Do you have to be a Hindi and adopt Hindi to make Ayurvedic work for you?
Yeah, I'm not Hindu, so there's that. So Ayurveda, the very first part of the ancient Ayurvedic texts, there's a dedication, and the dedication is, I hereby dedicate all Ayurveda and all of its wisdom to all living beings. So there is Ayurveda actually frowns on, segregating health people based on religion. It basically, the rule is, if someone shows up at your door and needs help, you help them. Period. End of story. It's part of the oaths you take as an Ayurvedic doctor. So it's super inclusive, but yes, it grew up during a time when Hinduism grew up, and most of the Ayurvedic physicians were Hindu. So they use Sanskrit as the base language. And there are you can definitely see the imprint Hinduism has left on the medicine, but the core principles have nothing to do with Hinduism.
I know a lot of our listeners, Victor, are probably wondering, do they need to choose between Ayurveda or conventional medicine? And so that's why we wanted to take a minute just at this next segment, just to see, how you believe Ayurveda fits with, US-based care and medicine today.
The short answer is no, you do not need to exclusively use one or the other. What I typically tell people is it is extremely dependent, whether it's Ayurveda, allopathy. It is extremely dependent on the quality of your individual caretaker or person you're putting in charge of your health. That is the single most important thing. I would rather you have a phenomenal allopathic doctor than a terrible Ayurvedic doctor. You are much better off, and vice versa, right? I'd rather you have a fantastic Ayurvedic doctor than a terrible allopathic doctor. I work with people all the time. They have PCPs. I work with allopathic doctors all the time. It basically, as long as both health practitioners have an attitude of let's help this person, everything seems to work out just fine. Yes, of course, sometimes philosophies clash, but never to the point where it becomes this like, no, you have to do one or the other. It's very rare that that happens.
So you brought it up. So what makes a good quality, practitioner?
Wow. That was a
Yeah,
loaded
great question.
question. Good luck with that one.
Yeah, thank you. All right. I think their priorities have to be in the right place. So priority number one cannot be how much money are you going to pay me? Not that that's not important. We have to make livings, but it can't be priority number one. Priority number one needs to be, am I going to take your health seriously? I think that needs to be priority number one. Am I truly engaged, mind, heart, and body, in assisting you return to a state of vitality? So I think that's a good mark. Now, how do you tell if someone is like that? Because there are a lot of people who can fake that. They have good bedside manner, but they're not really in the game. I think listening is a huge thing. Is someone willing to listen to your real problems and not just say, oh, yeah, yeah, okay, I get it. Okay, yeah, here's what to do. Okay, go for it. I can speak to the world of Ayurveda because I know it very well. If you walk into an Ayurvedic practitioner, counselor, doctor's office, there's a million names for us these days, and they try and say, yeah, here are a few herbs and here's your bill, just walk away. Don't do it. It's not going to work. You're not going to get what you want out of it. If they don't give you very grounded, practical advice that you can administer in the context of your life, they're not doing you any good. It doesn't do anyone any good to give these lofty, unachievable goals that just basically make a person more stressed. And if they ask you, back to the religious thing, if they ask you to do Hindu rituals and you're not Hindu, anything like that, they're probably not the person for you unless you're Hindu. Then it's great. But yeah, I think you can basically get the vibe. You can tell how invested they are in your life and making you better, and by how many questions they ask you, and how into the nitty gritty will they get. Like the cups of coffee thing we were talking about earlier. It'd be so easy for me to say, oh, 2 cups of coffee. Okay, next question, next question. No, that's not going to work. I need to know how many ounces of coffee you're drinking because that's what I'm suspecting is one of the causal factors in your situation, that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
All right, appreciate that. So you've talked us, taken us through the principles. I think ways to address it. You've talked a little bit about how to identify a practitioner at that level, the level of interest on this detail. Let's shift to your broader mission. Take us through what your institute is, why you established it, and what you're trying to accomplish with that, Victor.
Okay, so Institute has two goals. One is the clinical goal and one's the academy goal. The academy goal is to train the next generation of great Ayurvedic practitioners and doctors in the West. And I say in the West specifically because honestly, I'll just be blunt about it. Ayurvedic training in the West, for the most part, is tragic. I mean, it is like mass online, don't even have to ever show up in person, very basic, often misleading, kind of not good. So my mission is to start changing that and provide really high quality education like they do in India. There's a lot of high quality Ayurvedic education in India. It's very serious, takes a long time, takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of personal, devotion and work. It's not just some online thing you can do once a week for a little bit and think that you can now do Ayurveda. And just to give some context, really quick, in India, to become an Ayurvedic doctor takes 5.5 years. So this thing in the West where it's like you could do it in a weekend, I'm sorry, but it's just wrong.
Wow.
Yeah, it's tragic. It's really sad, and it's giving Ayurveda a bad name.
So who are your students then? Are these people that are already into wellness, or are they somebody just starting out?
Both. I have students of all levels, and I take on a very small student body, 10 or less, and I do a lot of individual training with them to make sure that they're good to go by the time they've graduated. So I have students who are just starting. I have students who are, they have clinics up and running, and they are actively helping people, and people are seeing extremely significant results in a wide variety of diseases.
So that answer goes back to some of your question, how might you identify a good practitioner to work with in the US? Number one, they could reach out to you and see if you got any students in the US that you would refer them to. Oh,
Sure.
and they might want to chat with you directly.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime.
Okay.
Happy to help.
Let's get into your own personal journey as we wrap up here, and let's look back at your turning point in your education and when you realized this was the path you needed to take.
Yeah. My turning point was when I had like a chronic pain in my back when I was about 18, 19 years old. And I went to what I knew, which was allopathy, and got passed around by a lot of doctors. And I'll make this story short because I know we're running out of time. But basically, one of the allopathic doctors, super honest, I very much to this day respect him and his approach. Is he's like, look, you're a young guy. We don't know what's going on. We're going to give you painkillers or surgery, and I don't think you want that. So I'm sorry, but don't keep going down this path. You need to find another path. So, and he did it very, very kindly. He wasn't dismissive at all. He knew what was going on, and he took the time to talk to me. So I appreciate that. And so I started looking for other answers. That's when I eventually found Ayurveda. And Ayurveda is one of those things where a lot of these things about health we kind of know, and we get these fragments of truth. And you go on YouTube, and it's like, oh, that's true. And you go, oh, that's true. But those two truths don't always work together.
Mm-hmm.
So when I found Ayurveda, I was like, oh my God, it's whole, it's complete, it's a comprehensive system that you can lock into. And it's not the only system, but it's a system you can lock into. And I started experimenting on myself. I started doing it, living the life, and lo and behold, I became very healthy. So I used it on myself.
How long did it take your back pain to go away?
Once I found the right, this was a yoga teacher, actually. Once I found the right yoga teacher, it took 2 weeks. But
That's how I got into holistic health, is back pain and hip pain,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So I had the type of problem that could be resolved quickly. Not all problems are like that. So I was fortunate in that. But for me, once I found the right answer, so to speak, it was very fast.
Now Breck knows I have a bias against yoga. I like Tai Chi and Qigong. So you can't answer yoga to this next question. We always like to give our listeners some practical steps they can take, knowing that to really go into depth like you did, they've still got to turn to the expert. But what's an Ayurvedic principle or practice that you would give people to say, hey, adopt this, how to start out and make a small step at least towards that Ayurvedic lifestyle?
Okay.
Yes, we can all do this week.
This week. All right. Something you can do this week is don't eat dinner after 7 p.m. Nothing. After 7 p.m., nothing. Shut it down. Drink a little bit of water, but that's it.
Now, you just ruled out half the New Yorkers,
I ruled out all of Italy. Are you kidding me?
I was going to say, yeah, I've got a friend
Wait a minute.
right now.
If you stay up till 2 a.m., stay up till 2 a.m., you could probably eat a little bit later, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but that's going to be point number 2. Don't go to sleep at 2 p.m. Not 2 a.m.
Yeah, but
yeah, one thing at a time, right? Yeah.
That's true. But that was one thing. Me as a Midwesterner, my wife still kids me about this. I eat it like at 5 or 5:30. Then I might have a light little light snack at 6:30 when I'm on my real plan, and then that's it. So stop before 7. That's the way I like to do because I'm eating at 5:30. That's dinner time.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, how can people learn more about your institute and get your book? How do we contact you?
So the book's not out yet. The book will be out in 2026, Ayurveda for Diabetes. I'm easy to get a hold of. Just go to my website, which is www.ayurveda, and I'm sure you'll have that in the notes because Ayurveda is not easy to spell. iiayurveda.com, or email me. Just email me directly, victor@iiayurveda.com.
All right. Thank you, Victor. It's been great to have you on the program. So much information. We'll definitely have to have you back because we are just scratching the surface here. And it's such a reminder that Ayurveda isn't just a healing system. It's an entire philosophy of life. And, it asks us to really aim higher and not just look for, relief of symptoms, but to really listen to our own balance and the overall vitality of our bodies as well. So thank you, Victor, for helping us see that wellness might not be a new discovery, might actually be an ancient reminder to us here. So thank you again. And until next time, stay curious, stay empowered, and remember, wellness, it's in you.